Welcome everyone to this week's NIM Community Call. I'm your host Sudo, also known as Simon, and we're going to be dropping a few announcements on you today. So I brought a few guests. Hopefully you're going to be as excited as I am. To introduce Paul Puey, who is the CEO and founder of Edge Wallet, which hopefully many of you already know. How is it going, Paul? Thanks for joining us. Did we lose Paul? Oh no, there's just a bit of a delay. We're really far from each other, so many thousands of kilometers of internet travel distance, basically. Of course, I also have someone with many hops in the mixnet, indeed. And of course, I also have someone with me who needs no introduction. In fact, he's been with me on, I think, 2 calls before this one. Harry Halpin, the founder and CEO of NIM. How's it going, Harry?
Yeah, I'm super excited for this kind of anarchist cypherpunk CEO get together, and yeah, I mean, the alliance growing between NIM and Edge is going to be super awesome, and I think it's something that I've had a lot of people wanted for a very long time. So I'm glad we can finally deliver it.
I couldn't agree more. Very excited to have this one. I will come out right out of the gate. I will tell people that I am a big fan of the Edge wallet. It's in fact the primary wallet I use, and I use it for as many things as I can and avoid using anything else. I love it, and hopefully you will understand by the end of this call why we here at NIM are very excited about this work together. But before we do that, of course, the usual opening thoughts. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. If you're watching the recording, also welcome. If you're watching us live, leave your questions and comments in the chat. We're keeping a close eye there. And of course, at the end, there's going to be a Q&A. So if you want to ask anything from Harry or Paul or myself, you can do that. And at the end, we'll pick those questions up. Today, we're going to be talking about, I'm not even going to go through the announcements. The gentlemen here with me are going to do that for me. So before we announce anything, though, let's talk about Edge a little bit. So Paul, turning to you, I wanted to ask you what Edge is and what sets it apart from the rest of the crowd.
Thanks for having me here. So Edge is a self-custody, I just call it like a trading wallet, multi-asset. I just recently counted, we got, I think, 60 plus blockchain supported. And what sets it apart are 2 things. Number one, we care a ton about privacy. I think before the call manifesto, where we outline where we are going to draw the line between what information Edge can see and what it can't. But as well, privacy, and drive it into the mainstream, even to people that don't care about privacy, that don't care about self-custody, the people that would use Robinhood and Coinbase and whatnot. So for a lot of the people that have used self-custody wallets for years, Edge might actually feel a little bit different. Ironically, to the 99% of people that have not used the self-custody wallet will probably feel very familiar. Edge does use conventional, seed phrases that you would create for each of your wallets. But unlike most apps, you don't have to write them down, right? We automatically encrypt them on your device, automatically back them up, apply a light form of 2-factor to your login credentials. You just create and log in. That capability, obviously convenient biometric login, and it's all source. So everything we say can look at the code base. So it's open source nature, which was actually pretty standard when we founded the company. Now it's a rarity to find a self-custody wallet app. A big focus on privacy. We support 4 chains, including, I think you were just mentioning Zcash, Harry, right before the call. And we worked closely with the Zcash team since 2017, I want to say, to build out a mobile-friendly SDK. So just incorporate that SDK from Electric Coin Company. And yeah, that's kind of a little summary. Excited, given our focus on privacy, excited to get something like NIM supported. We've looked at Tor since 2014, and it was never quite that simple to integrate. And also, it's not that private in many ways as well. So there's my little, introduction to Edge. Hopefully, people are familiar with this, and if you're not,
definitely.
I would just like to
Go
Yeah,
ahead, Harry.
I'd like to add one or two things in. So, Paul has been a huge supporter of NIM and like political fellow traveler for a very long time. We've been seeing each other at conferences. We tend to go to largely in the same conference circuit at MoneroCon. Recently, he was with the NIM team at Monerotopia, which we really enjoyed. And we at NIM, like, the more different kinds of users we get and the different kinds of cryptocurrencies we support, the more anonymous everyone is. So similar to Edge, we want to support as many things as possible. Now, one of the problems that NIM has had is that we do have this token and we have our own wallet, and you can use it with like Kepler, who I think on a phone call recently. But support for native NIM tokens, if you want to self-custody them, you want to use them, is actually pretty limited. There's not as many wallets as there should be. It's partially because we launched the wallet a long time ago, launched token a long time ago. When we launched the token, no one supported the kind of Cosmos stack that we had. Still, I think Cosmos support is pretty limited. And so usually we had this conversation with wallets where they just only want to support ERC20 tokens or like whatever kind of easy stuff there is to do. And they don't really care too much about user privacy. In fact, some of the wallets are, I'm not going to name names, but essentially surveillance devices. And that's their actual business model, not the fees that they're getting from you. So we don't deal with those kinds of wallets. We try to avoid them. And it's been a problem because we have good friends, Zuko, for example, big NIM. We were talking about NIM with him. He's always been supportive. And he's like, yeah, I think, I was like, I should get some NIM token. And I was like, well, awesome. And he's like, but I can't. I was like, why? He's like, well, I don't want to use exchanges. And I can't custody it in any way. And I said, well, you can install the NIM wallet. He's like, oh, I already have enough wallets. And then, he recommended Edge Wallet. I also use Edge Wallet. And I said, yeah. And I looked at my Edge Wallet, like, oh yeah, because I have a NIM wallet, obviously. I've had it but long time, right? So I look at the Edge Wallet, I'm like, oh dear, NIM isn't an Edge Wallet, so we should make that happen. And at the same time, Paul was reaching out, basically saying, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we got NIM actually defending users of the Edge wallet against surveillance, because you have a lot of Monero users, shielded Zcash users, people that really care about privacy. And it's a kind of dirty secret that most wallets have, is that even if the wallet is a very good actor, the connection between your client on your phone and whatever your light client, effectively, whatever you want to call it per cryptocurrency, and that kind of full node is a pretty large vector of attack. And so we do think that NIM can help wallets and not only just list the token, but help them become more private. And Paul has been, I think, the most privacy enhanced had a CEO with like a wallet, which is like full on wanting to support all the best privacy tech. So to me, I think it's a match made in cypherpunk heaven, so to speak.
That is absolutely true. And on that note, I had to bring a quote from the Edge Privacy Manifesto, and I want to ask you about that, Paul, because it's absolutely beautiful. It was in researching for this call, I read through your Privacy Manifesto, and it's beautiful. So let me just give you the quote. The Edge founders came together in 2013 with a mission to drive the fundamental benefits of cryptocurrency to the masses: financial freedom, autonomy, and most of all, privacy. However, to do so, we believe that technology providing privacy needed to be hidden behind a user experience that is adaptable by users that couldn't care less about these ideologies. You can't forget one of the core principles of privacy. Privacy increases with an increase in the anonymity set. Said more simply, the more people using a privacy tool or protocol, the better privacy each user gets. Would you want to be one of the 2 people using a private chat app like Signal, or one of 2 million people? With only 2 people, it's trivial to know the source and destination of the encrypted traffic, and therefore compromise the privacy of the participants. Absolutely beautiful stuff. I love to read it, and it's also it dovetails so well with what we're doing here at NIM in a very tangible way. So I wanted to ask you about this, like in practice, when it comes to Edge. How do you guys make this vision of privacy happen? What are the practical foundations?
So I look to, I mentioned Signal, and Signal is like one of my North Stars as far as user experience and privacy. And I know that a lot of privacy maxis will say there's still some compromises there. right? But I think in technology, compromises are here, left, and right. You just have to know where you're going to draw the line. And so where we're trying to drive privacy to the mainstream is by obviously hiding a lot of the cryptography, and even private keys are cryptography, right? And most people have never had to deal with private keys in just a self-custody manner. Although self-custody does not equal privacy, it's kind of a minimum requirement. If you don't have self-custody, you definitely don't have privacy. But key management being our fundamental piece that we are trying to hide from the user, but still make sure they control it, whether it's the keys for encryption, meaning that those are the keys, for example, like Signal, the keys that allow you to transact, those keys, not transact, but to encrypt data, those are only on your device and nobody else has them. You're controlling them, although they're a little difficult to recover on Signal, admittedly. For cryptocurrency, obviously you can't make keys unrecoverable. They have to be recoverable. And that system is what we've been building for now, 12 years. Our original app was called Airbits. It was a Bitcoin-only payments wallet, and it already had this architecture that we've just been improving over the past decade. That's the first piece. And then number two, we go through extensive effort within our app, and this is kind of a nuanced thing that most people in crypto probably aren't as aware of, but we go through a substantial amount of effort in the app to make sure that Edge doesn't know what addresses and transactions are Edge users. So most apps, for the sake of performance, and admittedly it is more performant to do this, say, something, we're just going to take your what are called XPubs for cryptocurrency. These XPubs can generate all of the addresses you'll ever have, potentially across all the chains, and they just register it with a server, and that server now knows whatever address and transaction you'll ever have for one specific user. Can't spend your money.
I have to say that's the absolute worst case scenario when it comes to privacy.
Correct, and it's pretty common for that to happen for most self-custody apps because it's so convenient. It makes the front-end app that you install on your phone or your computer very lightweight, meaning it doesn't really do anything. It just goes, hey, server, what are my transactions and balances? That's it. It doesn't actually have to query all of the chains independently and go through that effort, which is something that Edge does. And it is a bit more impactful. So we're constantly having to optimize that to make sure we're not, slowing down the app and making it tedious for the user. And I hate to say it, the sync problem that we run into with many chains, especially privacy chains, where it's got to download blockchain data. So by going through the effort of connecting to blockchains independently, we substantially improve privacy, but at the cost of substantial more engineering effort in order to keep that as optimal as possible. So those are some of the things that we do, behind the hood, while still trying to appeal to someone who would use Coinbase, because the difference in user experience between Edge and Coinbase is much narrower than the user experience between, a Coinbase and a Robinhood and pretty much every other self-custody wallet as far as seed management. And so we're trying to do both things at the same time, which admittedly is a challenge, but you know what they say, right? You don't go into this world to solve easy problems. And so I think the smartest people want to solve the hardest problems. And I feel like I've been able to surround myself with some pretty sharp people.
Yeah, I would say that, I've looked at a lot of wallets. You do have to be very careful with your wallet, right? So I personally only use wallets which are open source, ideally where I could get in touch with someone if something went wrong. And I have a kind of trusted, well-known code base. I typically avoid browser extensions when all possible. Everyone is a little bit confused on this. Typically, your phone will have better sandboxing than your computer. So if you can use Edge on your phone, I'd highly recommend it rather than, I don't know, let's say MetaMask or whatnot. And, talking to different chains is hard. One of the reasons why we're working with Edge is because a lot of other wallets, as a sort of dirty secret, do not do that, as Paul explained. You think you have this coin, you think you're talking to the chain, but you're not actually talking to the chain. You're actually talking to some, whatever database that they maintain. And, that's been a big scandal recently with the collapse of the Bitcoin price. And there's this theory, probably has a grain of truth, I doubt it's all of truth, that, part of the reason was synthetic Bitcoin and Jane Street and so forth and so on. But when you deal with privacy, you really do want, I'm not interested in synthetic Zcash or fake Monero on some wallet that's not actually talking to like the Monero chain, right? Like I'm just not interested in that. I'm not even sure if it's what you call it. It's just something that looks like Monero, but it's not actually Monero. So I want the real deal. And I really think that Edge is one of the few wallets that's going kind of the extra mile to make sure its users get the real thing, and not some thing which may confuse the user into thinking that they have custody, but they really don't. And I'd be very interested in how you do two-factor and recovery. A lot of wallets, I'm trying to think of wallets that do two-factor off the top of my head. A lot of wallets don't do two-factor. I do recommend people use some form of two-factor authentication, because otherwise, how do you know if someone's draining your wallet? If you get an email or a phone call or there's something you have to do, that's actually good. Now, there is some privacy loss there, but I think that's often worthwhile if you're dealing with substantial amounts of money. One way to deal with that situation is I want a total privacy wallet that keeps all my Monero for like purchases. So if I go to Monero Con, I don't want two-factor on that wallet. I actually have two phones. I recommend most people do. And you have another phone, which have like long-term kind of storage of your secrets. But that one probably should have two-factor, because if you lose that one, you could lose some substantial amount of funds. And however, what I've noticed is like wallets like, let's say Blockstream Green, you think you have the Bitcoin, but you actually have a multi-sig with Blockstream. So I'd be interested in how you implement two-factor, because that's one of the harder things to get right, I think.
Yeah, the story of two-factor goes way back to, I think 2015, on a long road trip I had with my co-founder, William Swanson. And we said, we want two-factor in the app, but we don't want to give up privacy. And one of the biggest challenges with traditional two-factor is, how do you recover it if someone loses the device that has two-factor, authenticated? And the traditional ways are an email or an SMS, right? So either the email or the SMS is the two-factor, which means there's not a really good way to recover it, because you're recovering it the same way that you're two-factoring it. Terrible idea. Or it's something else like a TOTP, one-time password. That would be this little 6 digits you see on like a Google Authenticator, LastPass Authenticator. But then how do you then recover that? And so we came up with a method that uses a very common security principle, which is time, right? A time delay, because we didn't want to collect anyone's personal information. So the way two-factor works in Edge is it actually uses the exact NIST standard TOTP that is implemented by Google Authenticator. But once again, we want to, back when we implemented this, most people did not use two-factor at all. Right? This is 2015. Most people are like, too much of a pain to go get a separate app, scan a QR code. Every time I log in, copy 6 digits from one app to another, especially if you're on mobile. It's too much of a pain. So we said, let's take the protocol of this app and Edge and smash them together. So in Edge, when you have at least logged into your account on, you say you created your account on a specific device, and you enable two-factor, which is just a touch of a button. We call it one-touch two-factor. You enable it. It generates the two-factor key, automatically registers it with our backend, and then every time you need to authenticate to the server to do anything sensitive, like, change your password, PIN, settings, or whatnot, it'll automatically send that 6-digit code behind the scenes. Right? You don't actually have to know it's happening.
Oh, that's cool.
If you're, I think it's nice. One touch, boom, you're done. You never see a 6-digit code, never have to see a backup key. You can still grab the backup key if you wanted, right? But you don't have to. It's kind of like the way we handle seed phrases. You can still see them if you want to, but you don't have to. And so what happens on a recovery? Well, if you go try to log in on another device that obviously won't have the two-factor code, it would say, well, you've got to go and approve it from a device that has it, which you might have seen in traditional apps. Or you can enter the code if you happen to write it down, copy and paste it, or you're locked out for a time window. And during that time window, we notify the devices that do have the two-factor code. And we don't notify by SMS or email because we don't have a way to contact the user other than, a push notification to the device. And that we can do. So we're able to employ what I call a recoverable no personal info, no KYC, two-factor that does protect the user. And that lockout time, we started off with 7 days, and now it's dynamic based on the user's kind of login, that account login history. Once again, an account is just an encrypted blob of data. We don't see anything inside of it. We don't know usernames. We don't know passwords. You mentioned, hey, what's the compromise of 2FA? Well, it's IP address, right? We do see that the device with a specific IP address happened to log in successfully at this point in time. And so we can use those as heuristics to say, well, here's how long you'll have to wait before you can get back into the account if you try to log in, but you don't have any two-factor authenticated devices. You say you've lost them, right, or you replaced them. We use those heuristics. So it's a mix of, in a way you can think of the two different factors are, one, you need the login credentials, and then two, you either need the device or you need time. And that time is, let's face it, time is frequently used in security in general as a way to protect the system, and that's what we implemented.
And that's a really interesting technique. Yeah, we should look into that ourselves. So for those of you that may or may not have, those of you have not noticed, we have latest versus VPNs. We're looking at two-factor and easier ways. So we have a lot of people who need to recover their NymVPN keys. NymVPN, when you use NymVPN, our app, what's actually happening is you get a Nym wallet address. You may not know that, but that's what you have.
I noticed that.
Key, and but people click through it, they lose it. So we're looking into recovery methods right now. You'll see some experimental recovery methods, standard stuff like email and SSO enabled. But we'd like to look at more secure and more private ways. And it's great that the mixnet, the 1 bit of data you're getting is the IP, and the mixnet can help prevent you get that IP. And even can prevent someone that's looking at you use your Edge wallet and looking at Edge can prevent that connection even. And that's I think pretty hardcore.
Yeah. And so one thing I failed to mention is that that's our actual full NIST standard two-factor, but all accounts created in Edge have a light form of that. We call it IP validation. I think we can't officially call it two-factor, where we use the IP address to determine whether or not a user can log in on a new device. So if you have logged in using a few different IP addresses, and then you switch devices, but you don't have two-factor enabled, you get locked out if you use a different IP address, but you're allowed in if you use the same one that you used recently. So it's not full two-factor. And so once again, while Edge does see these IP addresses, we don't see the correlation between those IP addresses and actual cryptocurrency transactions, right? Because we don't correlate the two. We don't say oh, this account logged in at this IP address.
Yeah.
And this account did all these transactions. Therefore, we know that these transactions came from this IP address, and this account, So we definitely have a hard line separation between those. And where we're very interested in the mixnet is for making sure that the cryptocurrency side, right, the cryptocurrency transactions are as strongly obfuscated and anonymized as possible. That way, any IP address information that we see, we definitively, can't remotely even tell what crypto transactions came out of that. It becomes like a blind, IP address and an encrypted account, and we have no idea what that account did. I think that's one of our missions, is to make sure to sever this giant hard line between those two.
Excellent stuff. Look, before we jump into adding the Nym token to Edge Wallet, which already happened, one of the first things I did was that I added my my wallet to Edge, my Nym wallet, and what that means, and maybe some additional features that are coming in the future. I wanted to also ask you about duress mode, which is in the age of an increasing number of, it's a fairly recent feature for Edge, if I remember correctly. And, in the age of increasing numbers of wrench attacks, which is a thing now, unfortunately, that we have to worry about, it's pretty important that you guys edit it. How does it work, and what does duress do?
Yeah, so duress mode, inspired by actually home alarm systems, where they would have a duress mode where you can enter a PIN into your alarm system to unlock the alarm. Right, if people familiar, you go into your house and the house detects someone opened the door, beep, 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 beep. You got to enter a PIN in order to disarm the home. Well, if you happen to be under duress, meaning someone's got a gun to your head saying disarm the alarm, you can enter a different PIN that disarms the alarm. All the sounds turn off, but it actually notifies law enforcement. So that is not what we do in Edge, just for clarity. It was inspired by that. What it does instead is it unlocks a decoy account, which has real private keys, but those private keys can hold funds that are a much smaller amount, right? You're spending funds. So if they've, on one side, here's your full account. It's got, your full real large funds, and you use your normal PIN to unlock that account. And then under duress, you enter a different PIN and it locks a smaller account, which has, different private keys, different wallets, which you can be using on a regular basis to spend from. But those wallets then also show up inside of your main account. So that way, on your regular basis, if you wanted to, you just unlock your main account and spend from these duress wallets. But under duress, only the duress wallets show up, because that sub account won't show your main ones.
This is so I don't know. I don't know all the wallets, obviously, but I don't know if this was your original idea or not. But this is just so beautiful, because in the situation where someone is wrench attacking you, if you just lock them out, right, or it becomes obvious to them that they don't access the actual wallet, that's very bad for you, right? But this is such a good solution to actually protect you in that situation and also your funds. So it's beautiful. I absolutely love it. It's very, very good.
So it's not the lose zero money. It's lose something that you can afford to lose, and hopefully satisfy the wrench attackers. Like, okay, if you've got 10 grand in there and you're like, give them 100, the average on the street wrench attacker might be happy with 100, 200 bucks. You know, especially if it is like an on the street wrench attacker. There's not a lot of time for them to deal with it because there's people walking around. Then it's like, oh, great, you got a couple $100. Leave me alone. I'm unharmed, hopefully, and so are my larger funds.
Yeah, and even if maybe they're more perceptive and smart, and they look at the transaction history, like you said, this account can be used as like a proper crypto account, so you can generate that account history there, make transactions, and it looks like a totally legit account. Exactly. So it's a very good way to bait and switch, basically. Excellent stuff.
Yeah, so I think this kind of, I would say, Russian doll approach to accounts, super useful. Back in like 2008 or 9, I had a lot of issues traveling, and agents want to search my computer. Is a similar problem. You don't want to travel without a computer because then it looks suspicious. So what you would do is I think the program was called Veracrypt, but you essentially, or TrueCrypt, I'm trying to remember the name of it, but you essentially put like an encrypted disk inside of an encrypted disk, and as soon as the border agent has unencrypted one of your accounts, like, oh, that looks like a normal desktop, but they wouldn't get, for example, your contacts or like anything you don't want them to have. You would put that in a separate encryption folder. And now, as we are seeing a lot of, it's sad to say, but we are seeing a lot of attacks on users, particularly in France, crypto users, and a lot of monkey wrenching attacks. I think you're going to see this increase. And people sort of say, never going to happen to me. I'm not, I don't know, Brian Armstrong from Coinbase or CZ. Like, why are you going to go after me? But in France, we discovered that the government administration, which then, in order to make sure people pay their taxes, centrally collects everyone's cryptocurrency account holdings. Someone in that office was then selling it to a gang to go after these, it has their address, has their balance, so forth and so on, to go after these people. So I think these kinds of attacks are real, and people should use wallets like Edge to prevent them, or at least minimize the damage that they'll cause.
Yep. And, I want to be obviously honest. If like one of the stories that came out of France was a full-on kidnapping hostage situation, and a feature like this isn't going to protect you from such an extreme condition. And this was a CEO of CEO or founders of one of the largest, most established crypto companies in the world. And so you're going to need much more security and OPSEC than a simple duress mode for that. But I think there are millions of other people who don't fit that category, where the threat is the, like on the street wrench attack. And so for everyone else, there's duress mode, I guess is the best way for me to describe it.
It's
just being honest as far as like what I think it protects from versus what it, not likely to protect you to the degree that you'd want.
Yeah, it's great that you added that. Obviously, it's a tool in a box of tools, hopefully, but it's a really good one. What will protect against stuff like what's happening in France, though, is maybe not having that centralized database in the first place. I think this is like a really good like practical proof of why that's really problematic. Only bad people have something to hide kind of argument dies with this with this example pretty quick. All right, gentlemen. Let's talk about the NIM token arriving to Edge. Again, I'm super duper happy that this happened. I already have my Edge wallet fully equipped with my NIM wallet. What does this mean exactly? So someone who maybe has a NIM wallet laying around, what can they do with those tokens, and how can they add their NIM wallet to Edge?
Yeah. So right now it's simply being able to send, receive, and hold NIM tokens on the NIM blockchain itself. So that's one thing they can do. And one of the beauties of that is now for people like Zuko and myself is being able to pay for the NymVPN with NIM tokens, right? If you've been looking for a way to do that and didn't want to jump through the hoops of using Kepler and whatnot, you can now do that straight from within Edge. Some things that are coming are the ability to swap into NIM. So we didn't yet have any of our existing swap partners supporting the NIM token, but we are getting both bridges and swap exchanges to support it. That way you can go from something like a Bitcoin or a Monero into NIM tokens and then use that to be able to pay for the VPN and then go back and forth between the two. After all, we call ourselves kind of a trading wallet, so you can easily exchange between different assets. So we're definitely not stopping at just, okay, you can now hold NIM. Great. Well, no, we want you to actually be able to get it as well. And so that way there's no question like, oh, I've got to use this exchange and blah, 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 and then take it out into Edge. Our goal from day one was, hey, you shouldn't need to leave the app, right? You can do everything within there. And so that's where we're trending towards, and hope people to get that within the next few weeks.
Oh, that'd be great. I mean, anything we can do to help there. I mean, I think NIM, if you can find, right now, I think if you want to exchange NIM to Bitcoin or vice versa, you have to go through like Bitfinex or Kraken, and it'd be better to have this done via bridges or other swap partners you have. We don't really know any of those people, so we're happy to push as needed. I do think, I mean, right now, obviously, we're in a bit of a downturn in terms of cryptocurrency as a whole. I think if you look at like the global picture, cryptocurrency is actually reaching mass adoption. Things like the Clarity Bill, which really disabled these kind of U.S. government attacks on cryptocurrency, will be passed, I think, eventually in a month or two, maybe 3. And then, the privacy narrative is still very strong. So I'm still quietly confident that just as we saw tokens that produced real utility, like, very few tokens can do anything, right? Monero and Zcash you can shield Zcash, you can make it encrypted. Monero is kind of encrypted by default. That gives you some privacy. NIM actually does give you access to network privacy, to effectively VPN, can get you through various firewalls and censorship. And we think that this is a really good setup for pushing the token back alive. So what we're going to do at NIM for the next 6 months, we're basically getting to the point, probably a month or two, where we believe NymVPN will be on parity, if not better, in terms of features than most VPN. Obviously, our architecture is more privacy preserving and decentralized and better for censorship from the get-go. But all of like the little things like, malware blocker and one-click connect, we're going to work making sure those get through get working. But then I really want to focus on the token and the operator community and getting these parts, which are really the people that really uphold NIM, really, really, really energized and with better tooling, better infrastructure. Because I still think the NIM token, if you look at other tokens, like we're not competing to be a currency or store of value. What we are saying is we're saying the same principles that work well with Bitcoin and Monero and Zcash can apply to privacy enhanced bandwidth. That's something we're all going to need in the future against increasing authoritarianism. And and right now, there's no decentralized networks that really give you that except NIM. And those that do aren't incentivized. We're a strong belief that incentivization helps the networks grow stronger. And, if you want, even to whatever, man, I just want to I believe VPN is going to be big because it looks like UK is going to ban access to the internet and everyone's going to need a VPN to get access to the internet in the UK. There's no even VPNs that are available on the stock market. They're all privately held. Right. So it's very hard, I think, for people to get that. We want more and more people, ideally the whole planet, to have access to NIM token to take a bet on freedom and fighting against authoritarianism in terms of censorship. But right now, it's very hard to get. So Edge is, I think, a huge win for us because it really gets, I think, the audience of NIM and the audience of Edge are quite close.
No, very much aligned.
Yeah. That's our edge, so to speak, through your Edge wallet.
Yeah, and I'm excited actually, not just incorporating the mixnet for those cryptocurrency transactions native to Edge. I think that had crossed my mind is a tighter integration even with the VPN side, allowing people from within Edge to easily maybe pay for or register that their NymVPN with a NymVPN app, and maybe even, and we could talk. This is. We've never talked about this, by the way, Harry. So this is kind of like, alpha to those that here listening. But I would love to be able to even maybe use the NIM keys that are already in Edge to be able to secure and enable their VPN in the NymVPN app. So we can become a key manager, not just for their NIM tokens, but also for the VPN itself, for their VPN subscription. So that way the NIM app and the Edge app are a bit more symbiotic in that regard. So everyone in Edge, we would love to advertise for everyone that already comes into Edge. Hey, use this VPN. How do you do it? Well, great. Get some NIM tokens, tap a button, install this app, and it automatically pays. And there's no additional keys that are necessary for the user to secure. They're already there inside of Edge, and they can be communicated between Edge and the VPN app. So things like that it start to excite me. Where, like I said, hide the privacy. And a 12, 24 word seed for your VPN is necessary for that very high privacy that you guys deliver. Now, how can we make it feel like they're NordVPN and whatnot, right? And I think that's where Edge comes in. We're going to make it feel like your NordVPN and other competitors, but give you that much more elevated privacy. And I promote NIM, as a VPN solution because it actually, I don't see its downside relative to the other ones, right? I'm not experiencing it's, other than I got to deal with the keys, right? But I know, as someone that's been in crypto, I can deal with it for now. Heck, I can actually just put it in.
We will get key recovery better. We're working. I mean, as you see, if you install the newest version of NymVPN, we're finally getting key recovery in NymVPN, which you guys have obviously thought about a lot. So I'd like to keep discussing that with you. I mean, one other thing we're thinking of adding is passkeys. Passkeys, believe it or not, I helped start the passkey effort at W3C before I sort of kicked off NIM as a startup. I used to work on web standards, and I was,
cool.
Back in 2012, I hosted a workshop more than 10 years ago called Identity in the Browser, and was there a way to do this in a privacy-preserving way? And from that work in the FIDO Alliance, we eventually kicked off a new working group that gave us passkeys. We still don't have those active in NIM, but we'll get all that active. And I think your vision of having it that I can use the same key material inside inside Edge to launch my NymVPN, and I can manage my NIM and my VPN in the kind of using essentially the same bucket of NIM token and trade and buy. That is really what we see the future of NIM being. The problem is that we don't have, you guys have a consumer facing wallet. So I think you can do a lot of that help us out, make that vision a reality, because that's clearly right now I cannot buy NIM in the NymVPN. I just, how would I get it? We don't tell you how, we don't make it easy. You have to kind of be almost an OG to figure out, that key that I just got when I installed NymVPN, that's actually my NIM key for tokens. That's not clear to people.
Right.
I think, you know, the main thing is that we would like to make that whole process smoother. And you're not the only one to notice that. We've been discussing this internally, but we decided, look, we need to get the VPN up to be just as good, if not, we want to be better than everyone else's VPN product. And then we wanted to pivot. But if you guys are starting that now, that'd be great. And other people, I mean, interestingly enough, we even, when we were right after relaunching NymVPN, you know, one of our first investors was Binance Labs. They got now Easy Labs, and CZ got in touch, and that was actually what CZ also was thinking. He took a look at NIM. He's like, yeah, he's like, you know, this is actually a blockchain product, but it's not obvious. And whatever next version you do, you should kind of take that more into account and really focus on the blockchain aspects. But then he quite realistically noted to us, if people have been using NymVPN in a while, you notice what's been happening is the reliability and performance have been increasing, because when we first launched, like, it was pretty shaky. It was a new network, new protocols, new user interface. We want to get that kind of that stuff solid first. However, I do think the future will push down that, and if Edge can help us make that happen, that'd be absolutely wonderful. Because I think that's a real big unlock. We want to reduce the friction between people who have Edge wallets that get NymVPN and people that have NymVPN that can get Edge wallets.
Yep, exactly. I'd like in a way, you bring up passkeys, and most passkeys are held in some kind of a key manager, and in a way, that is kind of what Edge is a very private, cryptocurrency hardened key manager. We're more, how do I say it? You know, we have a bit higher level of thought process into security than your average password manager, because we're not just securing passwords, we're securing money, right? And whereas an average password manager that could be your passkey manager has your email in the clear in their database. Yeah. So if their database ever were compromised, it's like, oh, look at these high value emails of people that are worth a ton of money. And so the thought process, you know, is much deeper in what we do to secure keys. And so one of the missions of what we've wanted, and we've talked about it for like half of the duration of our entire company's history, is to become a password manager as well, which then becomes a passkey manager for people's, not just cryptocurrency, but for authentication to things like potentially like a NymVPN app and standard Web 2 credentials and whatnot. It's something we'd like to do. That's, and I think, you know, it should be in our mid to short term future.
That's pretty awesome. And this is where I wanted to ask you guys about something else that is also really awesome, and I think sort of ties in here. What would make a password manager and also crypto wallet very, very amazing? In my opinion, if all the network connectivity that happens to make it to make the app work would happen over a network that makes people untraceable, that would be pretty damn cool, if I do say so myself. So maybe let's talk about the prospect of adding the mixnet under the Edge wallet and what it would mean for Edge users, because that's also, as far as I know, this is also alpha territory, guys. Don't tell anyone, all right? But from what I understand, you guys have also been discussing that. What's the thought process?
Yeah, so we've been more than discussing that. We've implemented it to a degree. Right.
Okay.
And so it's what I call let's call it a technical preview right now. And so we've been working very closely with Harry's team, because that's what I'm very, very passionate about, is actually getting the mixnet inside of Edge to obfuscate IP address traffic, you know, specifically for things like cryptocurrency, blockchain transactions, you know, querying miscellaneous data such as DEXs, getting a quote from a DEX, getting exchange rates, you know, because there's many different things that an app does that need to hit the network. So a lot of the traffic we'd love to send over the mixnet. And what we have actually live today, right, although it's an older version of the NIM SDK, is the ability to use the mixnet for traffic to EVM networks, Cosmos chains, including NIM, right, and Monero. So it is, admittedly, it's an older version SDK, so it has some, maybe Harry, you can go into this a little bit better than I can, but it has some throttle limits, if there how much traffic that we can send over the mixnet, and so it'll frequently fall behind on being able to sufficiently settle all of the network calls that a user does under the hood, or the app does under the hood. And so while you can enable it for like literally everything, you know, like all your EVM chains, Monero, blah, blah, right now it recommends don't enable it for more than one. And, you know, let's see how it does. We want to get feedback from users. Where does it work? When does it doesn't? When does it not work? What do they run into? What errors or whatnot? So technical preview is best thing I could describe it as right now, but we do invite people to try it, especially try it for privacy coins like Monero, where you can at least obfuscate your traffic to and from a Monero Lite wallet server.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, what's been great about Edge is I think you guys, unlike like most wallet, we talked to a lot of wallet teams, and most of them aren't very technical. And you guys have a super hardcore tech team, and you were able to do integration really without really asking us and just figuring it out. And then a lot of the road bumps you said, like, how can I send more traffic to mixnet? How can I open more than many simultaneous connections? Why is the mixnet not delivering the traffic? Why is it dropping traffic? I can't get this traffic through. Why am I having to reset the route? That was all really, really important to us to get that feedback, because we didn't have that many people using the SDK. Most of the people were kind of using this kind of old school SOX client. And even then, you know, that was, you know, not quite there yet. With the SDK, we weren't really actively maintaining it except for work on very specialized work to get things working in Zcash. And so you had much more general questions and problems. And luckily, what that's helped cause is we're going to really focus on fixing a lot of these issues with the SDK. So, you know, we at some point, you know, if you probably has any SDK developers in here, you know, we have WebSockets and TCP/IP. Oh, you know, the mixnets are running on top of TCP/IP. You're authenticating via WebSockets. This is like interesting, but too slow. Packets drop. You get TCP/IP congestion problems. You kind of get in kind of a almost an infinite loop of congestion problems. And then we also just have problems with like there's certain bounds, like how many Sphinx packets can you create? How can you essentially multiplex this better? And these are not problems. You know, the other people, I think DarkFi has some similar problems. They're trying to do like a peer-to-peer connections over the mixnet. And of course, you have a lot of peering connections. And these are all things which we're currently trying to fix. So in particular, I think we will migrate off of straight TCP/IP over to UDP and a big network upgrade, which most people will have to survive because it will be a little bit, will be essentially a hard fork on the app. The older apps and SDKs will at some point stop working. We'll try to make it backwards compatible for as long as possible. But I think the moving the UDP and a little bit of crypto optimization, plus kind of parameter optimization should let us make the mixnet much more reliable and much more scalable for multiple connections. I think, you know, when you first start in the mixnet, you're like, okay, well, can I read a single web page over it? And can I embed it in a web page was kind of what we were thinking. We weren't really thinking of, you know, certain kind of larger scale environments where you're calling 20 blockchains at once, 30 blockchains, and you need different connections all running at the same SDK. That just wasn't in our mind. We were doing the first version. And, you know, for those of you who are old school JavaScript devs, you have to remember the JavaScript used to be effectively single threaded. And that was obviously kind of built into our JavaScript SDK. Obviously, we need to take that out. And you see the JavaScript community moving away from older, more rigid frameworks that because we started this quite a long time ago, we were attached to, like Next.js. And so we're dropping some of those design patterns and replacing more modern patterns. And that should let wallets and any other app use NIM much more effectively. But we wouldn't be doing this had Paul and the Edge team that said, "Oh, geez, why is this not working? Why can't you support that? Can you like this doesn't this is?" And then we say, "Oh, well, then you're right." And so it's definitely going to keep our devs busy, but we're happy if it brings real users in. That makes it all worthwhile because that's our job, to defend actual users.
Well, I'm going to give you guys some credit because, you know, I'd mentioned early in the chat about us wanting to integrate Tor. You know, we've been wanting to do that since about 2015 when we first launched our original app Airbits, and we looked at the integration, like, oh, would we have to do the SOX proxy thing? And that's not a good user experience. And at the time, Tor was a monolithic app. as opposed to it being a library. Since then, iOS and Android libraries have come out, but the integration of those libraries is like close to a nightmare as far as how they would operate. You have to wrap the entire socket interface with this Tor library. And to your credit, you guys came out with what I think is, you know, this nice little package for a lot of JavaScript style apps with the mix fetch that really mirrored how we're already making a good chunk of our networking calls, right? And so the hard part was, you know, getting that to build properly inside of the app and run. But once you have that properly compiling and built, it was mostly a swap one function call for another, right? And I think that's the beauty of what you guys have built, which is so stark different than what we saw to integrate something like Tor, you know, with far less privacy. And so when you had that, that sparked my mind of, okay, there's a path forward. You know, I'm sure this is going to be glitchy at first, and we're going to run into some problems, but we're willing to kind of work with and send feedback to a team that at least has the vision to go, hey, how do I make this easy for a developer with just simple lightweight package? Well, maybe it's heavyweight, but it looks lightweight from the viewpoint of what does the developer do to their existing code base that calls the network, you know, before and then after with Nym. So that was kind of the unlock when you guys, you know, mentioned we have a mix fetch. And so I give credit for you guys for having that insight. And that type of like easy swap is what we're going to try to push for other aspects of the networking stack that we use. And then that would really enable us to really broadly use Nym across many different parts of the application.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you know, thanks to you poking us, you know, our lead integration dev, who really deserves all the credit here, Max Hampshire, and our CTO, Mark Sinclair. I mean, MixFetch was not mine here. Mark Sinclair is an old school developer, and he was like, okay, like we want to make this easy to use. This is the pattern we use. So MixFetch was his idea, and then as you met Max is doing all this hardcore Rust work, FFI bindings, really making it the SDK, the best SDK it can be. And that has been absolutely, you know, I think, you know, with their heavy lifting and you saying, okay, cool, I really like mixfetch, but let's make sure we can run 10 mixfetches in parallel. Can we run 20 mixfetches in parallel? I think we will deliver all of that. It will take some time because, you know, this stuff is not easy work technically, but I'm very confident in the Edge team and the Nym team working together to solve all these. And, you know, that lets you guys be the first privacy enhanced wallet to the market with Nym, and that's great for us. And because we think, again, it's like the same kind of users that really care about privacy and security.
Absolutely, we've got the same interested user base. Although I want to get the people, like I said, I want to get the people that don't care and they just magically get it. Increase our anonymity set, get more traffic on the mixnet, and so let's just say that one of my missions over the next couple of years, and maybe that puts a lot of pressure on you guys over at Nym, is to make that enable on by default. Just like that, right?
We should be able to get on by default by end of this year, if not earlier. I'd be shocked. And I also think,
like, for some aspects of the network, maybe it's not all the network traffic, but let's, you know, for these subset, on by default.
It should totally be on by default. And then I would also argue that what we should do is, you know, one thing is that a lot of people find, you know, Nym really hard to use, or they don't know anything about cryptocurrency. And, you know, but I think there are many people that philosophically agree with us, also from very different backgrounds, but they say, look, we need privacy. We're worried about government overreach, worried about big corporations and monopolies and oligarchies trying to control us. And I think that's actually a huge sector of the population. People think that people are into privacy, or like this weird little minority. But I actually find that there's increasing amounts of people who have, you know, real concerns about privacy. And, you know, you guys, I think one thing which I really respect is you guys advertise. You advertise at conferences, which are not just cryptocurrency conferences. You're going to PorcFest. You're going, you know, which is where a lot of the early Bitcoiners came out of in the libertarian movement in the U.S., but they, you know, got disconnected from. Most people don't go back. Anarcho-Polko, these sort of anarchist conferences. And I think people there, they're philosophically aligned, but they're not technically aligned. They don't know, maybe don't even know these tools exist that can really help them and help them kind of live the political and philosophical ideals that they have. And so our job is to provide those tools. And I think that will be an awesome thing, seeing like people that really need and really want to understand the software, why we're building it, but may not understand the complexities of web sockets or JavaScript SDKs or Rust async, seeing those people jump on board and really get some value out of it. So I think we do have to go to questions. No, I mean, at some point, I'm unfortunately have to run in 10 or 15 minutes, but I think we've gone over.
Yes.
So I think Sudo has a question for you. I'll be right back.
That's fine. I'll do the first questions.
All right. So big thanks for this chat. It was absolutely lovely. And, time flies in good company. And thanks for staying over a little bit. While Paul is coming back in a few minutes, I wanted to ask you this community question from Jason, which is 100 plus new partnerships in 2026? Question mark. Will we have 100 plus?
I mean, depends what you mean by partnerships. I would like to see 100 integrations in 2026. Realistically, there's only so many people in the NIM team, so that we can handle 100 partnerships at once, particularly if the partnerships require technical work, because we just will bottleneck. Now, the way to solve that problem is to build a larger and larger NIM community so that people can understand NIM and, using free software principles, fix their own problems with NIM and contribute that code back to the code base. I think that's where we're going. And that would enable 100 plus partnerships. That being said, we've been working very selectively, I would say, on a few really large partnerships, Edge being the first kind of wallet partnership. I think we'll see more coming over this year. And we'll definitely have a few exciting, I would say, browser partnerships and exchange partnerships coming.
Exchange partnerships. Excellent.
Yeah. Exchanges are now kind of more interested in privacy than they used to be.
All right. Thanks for that answer. While Paul is still not here, I'm going to give you another question, Harry, that is more NIM specific than...
Yeah, go give me the NIM questions. We can hold the Paul questions for when Paul gets back, I think.
Yes. Wait, which one? Okay, let's do this one. It's a pretty like generic or general privacy related question from Rocio. Thanks for the great question, Rocio. If privacy is necessary for an open society, how does code as speech protect us from CBDCs?
Yeah, so CBDCs are, they are code, right? So it's like a CBDC. The way to think about it is typically either a big database or a centralized blockchain mechanism, which is a centrally banked digital currency. So that the currency's inflation rate, who gets it, is determined by a central bank, by a single authority. So it's not decentralized, it's not permissionless, and it's typically ran by a national bank, a nation state, maybe subcontracted to some big corporation. And we have these already in China. Switzerland has talked about them and hasn't done one. The US looked like they were doing one, but now they're not doing one. And the problem is that what's going to happen is the governments, as they suffer increasingly large amounts of problems, internal decay and collapse on the horizon, what often do is they tighten their control of the currency. They do tend to print more. It's this phenomenon of inflation or debasing the currency in order to fund, for example, foreign wars, so forth and so on. And then what happens is, over time, that currency becomes less and less valuable. Now, code as speech was meant to kind of protect us from government overreach, from authoritarianism, from corporate surveillance, to give us the freedom to express ourselves and be who we are. And one thing that was kind of left out of the original, some of the thinking on this, is that some of that is financial. That if I'm on a CBDC and I do something the government doesn't like, the famous example being the Canadian truckers who were protesting against COVID and got all their bank accounts turned off in Canada. That's a real violation of my freedom. And so what we want to do is, we're probably going to see a bifurcation of currencies. We're going to see governments push more and more towards CBDCs, maybe not all governments, but quite a few, says they want to increase control and surveillance of financial activities. But then we're going to see in a kind of, I would say, agorist tradition or a dual power parallel structure, which was already obviously emerging with Bitcoin and Monero and Zcash, of kind of free privacy enhanced cryptocurrencies, which governments can't control. And the real race which is going on now, which is a race which is, I think, more important than people realize, is if all currencies are forced to accept, all merchants are forced to accept CBDCs and tokens and Bitcoin and Zcash and Monero that only used for speculation, that's going to make an alternative free economy impossible. So what we have to do is we have to support building parallel infrastructures which are not CBDC enabled to allow these kind of parallel economic structures to arise, which are not based on surveillance and authoritarianism, and ideally, maintain value better than rapidly inflated and debased currencies. And this sounds like a little bit like crazy talk, but you have to remember, I've been in Lebanon, right? So Lebanon had a 2,000%. I was there, inflation spike, right? So if you had all your money in a bank, its value went to zero. You went to get it out, they wouldn't let you. People had to rob the banks to get their money out. It was insane. And if you had Monero or you had Bitcoin, I'm sure this is the case for many countries in Latin America as well, and I think will be the case eventually, even in countries in like Europe and the United States. Those people actually were okay. But the problem that we had in the Middle East at that time is we didn't have enough merchant adoption. So you still had to kind of do this weird thing. You had to like exchange, Monero for like the local lira to like buy food, and ideally the whole parallel economic infrastructure would emerge. Sorry, that's a bit of a rant, but I think you have a lot of questions, Paul.
Yeah, you got a lot of questions, Paul. Let's jump one that is more edge specific. I like this one from Alexi. Thanks for the question. Wallets are adding a lot of scam prevention features nowadays. Is it possible for Edge to as a privacy wallet?
I think us being privacy focused doesn't really inhibit us from adding scam protection. The hardest part is that most people that are getting scammed can't even be talked out of getting scammed. Ironically, we've had people call our support asking for help on doing things like how to buy Bitcoin or, how to send it to an address that, maybe they didn't know quite how to do the copy paste, some older folks and whatnot. And after discovering where they wanted to send their crypto, we like, oh, this is absolutely a scam website. They wouldn't want to believe us. Like they're like, no, this is, my friend used this site, it's fine. Or it's a romance scam. And they're like, no, this person really loves me. And, we're going to meet next month, that kind of thing. And so that's one of the toughest parts about the scam is like literally seeing it happen in front of you and you cannot convince this person otherwise. And so the app itself, I don't know that any aspect of it being private is inhibiting us more than the fact that people just actually want to go down the path of a lot of these scams. And we're having to play like psychologists to go, how do we actually talk to them properly to get them off the cliff, because they're, they've fallen hook, line, and sinker. But in the app, it's almost for some people that are scam resistant, almost become a little annoying where they're like, oh, watch out before you do this, make sure it's not a scammer, right? Cryptocurrency transactions are irreversible. Make sure you trust the person you're sending this to. And so those aspects of scams have been like we've done our best, and there's nothing that is privacy compromising for those things that we have done so far. But this is where I want feedback. Like, do you know someone that's fallen into a scam? What would have prevented it? Is there anything we could have added to the app that would have protected users?
I personally think eventually it becomes an issue of your use of free will, like you explained, Paul, basically. I don't know if there's ever going to be a solution to naivety, which is one of the most evil and despicable thing to exploit in my opinion, but that's what
Yeah.
these scammers go for, unfortunately. And it's very hard to protect people against that on the wallet level. You do see, I did see on your website, you have like a scam prevention education on there, which is, you know, obviously not everybody's gonna go through all the website and what, but it's, you know, better than nothing.
Better than
We're
nothing,
struggling with the it's, you know, we're struggling with the same thing on our Telegram and Discord and other socials as well. You know, obviously scammers are absolutely everywhere, and you know, it's just it's a bit of a losing battle. The awareness is the key, right? People should be aware of how these things work. They should be pointed to like real, tangible examples where they see the patterns and they can recognize those themselves. But there's never going to be a perfect solution, unfortunately, to this problem. Thanks for the great answer. Thanks for the great question, Alexi. Next one is also from Rocio, which is that data privacy and network privacy is now a reality with Edge Wallet and NIM. Is data privacy and network privacy now a reality with Edge Wallet and NIM?
I won't call it a reality yet. Like I said, I would call it like a technical preview, but know that this is a sign of it can be a reality in the near future. And so that's the piece that we want to get to. Are we there yet? You know, I wouldn't call it because it's not by default. Once it's by default, then I think we're there. But I think the pieces, the hard pieces are put in place for the integration between these two projects. That's going to get us there, Rosie.
Yeah, and I think we'll have it by default, you know, soon over the next few months, if not at worst case end of year. Although, you know, never know what roadblocks we might go into. But then once you're using Edge Wallet with a privacy enhanced, not just normal, like if you're just using like whatever USDT, then no, you don't really have privacy.
You don't have that, right? Exactly.
But if you're using shielded Zcash or Monero, then yes, you will have data privacy, particularly because Edge is, as Paul outlined before, is doing data minimization. It's not collecting your data. So that's great.
One thing I think that would be useful, just like you appreciated, Harry, when we tried to use the SDK and we ran into this or that and, you know, sent you feedback, I think for people out in the wild to actually go turn this thing on and see what happens and also see it under different networks. I think one thing that we had noticed, Harry, is that like the Wi-Fi in our office could be different than the Wi-Fi at my house versus me on my cell phone 5G around town. Right, we'll get notably different network behavior. Send that information over to us. You know, that could help. Yeah, I presume Harry's team to determine like what some possible fixes are or paths forward. As an example, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I was like with NymVPN, we definitely had a period when we first launched. People would switch networks and it would fail. And then we debugged this eventually. We got it working again. And I'm sure there's many edge cases and problems we missed.
Exactly. Yep. I noticed, for example, privacy chains such as Zcash and one of its forks, Pirate Chain. Pirate Chain, like you mentioned me going to Anarchapulco, there's a ton of people who are fans of Pirate Chain there.
Oh, interesting. I've actually met the Pirate Chain community. They'd be very interesting and cool to meet, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, they're a fork of Zcash. And so obviously they're against the like shielded side of Zcash, so hence they wanted like private mode only. But we had noticed on a network level that several people could not sync Pirate Chain wallets if their phone was on their normal LTE or 5G service.
Interesting.
Right? Even though everything else worked perfect, like it was like, you know, all the other wallets synced fast. It wasn't that it was slow, it's that those networks seemed to be doing some type of packet filtering such that they couldn't sync those wallets. But as soon as they went to the Wi-Fi of the conference, then those synced fast and quick. And it had a thesis that it could have been because the network traffic looked non-standard versus a standard, you know, HTTPS connection, right? Or REST or WebSocket connection, which is indistinguishable from the kind of thing, you know, a cell phone provider would want to allow on their network, which is I want to surf the web and hit API calls to like Uber, right? And we had this issue when we first launched our original implementation of Bitcoin, which went over, it was actually using a protocol that was worked on with Amir Taki, LibBitcoin. And so that went through a kind of non-standard TCP/IP protocol, and that would be blocked by a lot of ISPs, especially cell phone mobile ISPs. And when we had switched to another server, what do they call it? Call it like a super node, right? Indexing node that used standard, networking calls, REST and WebSockets. Now no one has an issue, right? Because it's indistinguishable. You can't tell what kind of what kind of traffic it is. So little nuggets like this has helped us at the networking level, and so hence this is an invitation, to all those people listening. Hey, try it out. Let us know where you experience success, where you experience failure. We can bounce that feedback right back to the NIM team, see what we can do ourselves, and get to that point where this is just on.
Yeah, we'll be doing I was just with Amir last week, and he's actually the one that gave me, I think, my first Bitcoin.
Wow.
And back in, I think I saw him in 2012 at like a squad. I actually didn't take it very seriously at the time, but LibBitcoin, Eric from LibBitcoin is also an early NIM supporter. Amir's a NIM supporter. And we're also getting feedback from the DarkFi team. The DarkFi team has had similar issues to you in terms of numbers of concurrent connections weren't working very well. So we're having, and we're trying to, it's like, okay, well, cool. We just fixed this for Edge. And I told him, I was like, hey, Amir, like can DarkFi like try this, click to see if this integrates better now and works, because they're fully peer-to-peer, so they had lots of concurrent connections. He said, oh yeah, I remember Paul and Edge, like they were the first people to use LibBitcoin. They were really early on. I was like, wow, it's a very small world. So he sends you his regards.
Awesome. Yeah. It was good to see him at MoneroCon, where you were at as well.
Yeah. It was fun.
Gentlemen, we're way over time, but there are still two questions that I wanted to ask. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to the audience, but we won't have time to address all your questions. But I'm the host.
If you put them in text, if you can cut those questions that we can't get to, put them in Telegram. I'll try to get to them, basically.
Yep, we'll do it. We'll also get them. We'll also get them to you, maybe Paul, and you can give us a few lines. But there's one question I'm gonna pick because I get to do that because I'm the host. So you'll have to just deal with it. I really want to hear your thoughts on this one because I think it's a very timely question. Thanks to Azanebraza. Yes, I said it.
Got it. Yeah.
How will you protect Monero support if App Store / Google Play Store pressure increases?
So two facets of this, right? One is what's the short-term protection and what's the long-term protection. I'm going to start with the long-term protection, which is the best way to protect a technology is to get it used. Like everyone says, like, oh, Bitcoin is unstoppable money. I go, no, it's not. It's just harder to stop. What makes it truly unstoppable is if people use it, because now you want to make governments and entities like Apple shoot themselves in the foot if they try to stop it. Right? It's got to hurt their bottom line. Kind of like it did in 2014 when Apple banned Bitcoin wallets. I don't know if people recall this, but they fully banned all Bitcoin wallets in 2014. And that it went viral. People posted videos of them shooting their iPhones, right? And guess what? Apple reneged and they allowed Bitcoin wallets. And so usage is the best protection for any technology. Short term, well, fortunately for Google Play, there's alternatives. Every Android could install APKs directly, can install from alternate app stores. And they can install Edge directly from our website, edge.app, right? We'll show a link to download it directly. So that's an alternative for Android users. App Store, not nearly as good of an alternative. However, ironically, at least in Europe, while we haven't deployed it, one of the backups for people in Europe is that apps can deploy their own direct download of iOS apps. So that is an option that we can exercise in at least that region. And hopefully that expands to more parts of the world as well. But the fact that Android does have the ability for people to install APKs directly, that limits what I would call interest in trying to ban this subcategory of apps that support something like Monero. And then as well, same thing for Apple. It's one of those, like, sure, they could, but they'd be giving up some of their business over to the Android ecosystem. and they've already lost
Yeah.
a good chunk of that from any aspect of the censorship that they have employed, and they would just be making that worse. And if we grow Monero interest and get people using it, that becomes a bigger threat to Apple and Google. So twofold approach.
Wasn't Apple forced by the EU to allow sideloading as well, at least in the EU, if I remember correctly?
Yeah, and while I'm not a big fan of regulation, this is one of the few pieces of regulation that actually enabled a bit more, freedom within the Apple ecosystem, at least. So yes, that sideloading is what I'm referring to.
Actually, I would have to I almost not by default. I'm not a big fan of regulation, but some of the stuff that the EU has pulled, USB-C, which is also like just a tremendous tragedy to have like a proprietary connector for iPhones, and also the like opening up the walled ecosystems. I'm kind of on board with those, but yeah, regulation we should be careful with.
Regulation, I'm on board with those because it's inhibiting a monopoly on an ecosystem which is empowered by regulation in the first place, such as a ton of the patents that Apple has that kind of inhibit competition. So to me, it's duct tape. Most regulation that I only like because it's duct tape on other regulation that made it necessary in the first place to have duct tape. Right.
Yeah, so I'm going to jump, but I would say that for me, there's not a huge difference between corporate monopolies on products and state monopolies on products or violence or whatever. Like a monopoly is a monopoly. Monopolies always lead, even if they have the best of intentions behind them, to authoritarianism. This is why we need to support both technical decentralization through blockchain technologies and also political decentralization to whatever extent is possible. And it's a long road, but I do think humanity benefits most in a decentralized environment where we can kind of maximize our freedom, be that politically or technically. And on that long road, we will have to use regulations to increase our freedom and our decentralization. And we may have to do temporary alliances or whatnot, but I think we should just keep our kind of, as they say, eyes on the prize of the real goal, which is decentralization for human freedom. And technical projects like Edge and NIM are a small part of a much larger philosophical and political vision that's existed for hundreds of thousands of years, not millennia. And I got to run. I'm really sorry. I have another meeting coming up in about 10 minutes. So
some magical closing lines. Thank you for joining, Harry. We're gonna wrap up here in just a few minutes. So if you wanna also jump, Paul, but then feel free to do so. I would have like a semi half question for you at the end. Sure. But
wrap up with
all right.
That last closing thought question.
All right, so big thanks to the audience for listening in. It was a lovely conversation. Hopefully you enjoyed it just as much as I did. Big thanks to both of our guests for jumping on today. Paul, it was lovely to meet you. Hope I will get to see you again. And actually, just as a side note, I did on my Android phone just check, and indeed I can now enable mixnet-based connectivity with all kinds of blockchains. Very exciting to see that on Edge. Very, very exciting. So excellent stuff. As it's a little tradition here in the NYM community, we're going to give our listeners a POAP, which is a little NFT. You can also claim it, Paul, if you want to commemorate us hanging out together. So I'm going to reveal the secret phrase. Secret phrase is the link to Edge's website. So it's edge.app, all not capital letters. And the POAP is this guy over here. Want to talk about that a little bit, Paul? Why do you think we chose this this design?
Do I still have that on my my Twitter profile as
no, you have it on LinkedIn. I thoroughly stalk everyone that's on these calls. So I found this on your LinkedIn. I think
climbing was a big part of my life for a good chunk of time, and so not too many people know, but literally the last thing I did before I entered the crypto space was manage a rock climbing gym and do some outdoor guiding. Admittedly, I was in a lot better shape before I discovered Bitcoin, but it is one of my loves. I need to get back to it more frequently than I've been over the past several years, given both family, as well as being a startup founder. But it's what actually got me out of, ironically, some health challenges. It was getting out onto the rocks, climbing both indoor and outdoor. And so I'll never forget, and hopefully it won't have to forget that part of my life and past. And I do highly recommend it for anyone who hasn't tried it. That's in just even moderate. You don't have to be in great shape, just even moderate shape. It's what I love about it is it's a great balance of mind and body. A lot of people think of like yoga and how there is a very mindful aspect. Climbing is kind of a similar alternative to that. And a lot of climbers do yoga as well. Because while most people think, oh, I can't even do one pull-up, so I'm going to go to the climbing gym. Well, it's 90% mind, and 10% body to be able to do some of the basic climbs. And especially for anyone that uses a computer a lot, it is an amazing way to strengthen, the hands that you deal with on a repetitive basis, which is actually one of the injuries that I have is repetitive strain. In climbing helps balance that out and strengthen. So highly recommend for everyone. Thanks for bringing that up. Glad it's the POAP of the day.
Yeah, it is the POAP of the day, and I agree with everything you said. Climbing is great. I'm not an expert climber, but I'm one of those people who can do a pull-up because I do calisthenics, and I try to solve everything when I go to a climbing gym from pull strength, and it's always the bad idea. Like you said, it's mostly mind, it's mostly technique. If you haven't tried it, ladies and gentlemen, try it. Big thanks for joining me today, Paul, and hope to see you again.
Pleasure chatting. Yeah, we'll definitely chat again.